Well, hello, traders and investors. I'm L.A. Little. This is your daily NeoTA wrap. Take a look at these markets. I'm doing it different, folks. We're doing it from a neoclassical perspective. If you've listened to me before, you know what it means. It means we look at supply and demand on the charts. We find those points of significance, areas on the chart that when tested give us information. You saw me last night tell you we're going to get a bounce today. That was because there was reads, there was information released that told us that. It's not magical, right? It's pretty methodical, actually. But it's neoclassical, something I invented, something I created, a model I created over a decade ago that I've used throughout the crash. In 2008, made money, and made money since as well. So if you like what you see, if you like what I do, you probably ought to check it out. Had a new member join today as a referral. One of the members, I told him just that he really needed to join this site, get the information that we release here, and the education that we provide. If you're interested in it, just give me a call or jot me an email. Either way, 303-912-9110 is my number. Direct line to me, folks. Just pop it in your phone, give me a call. I'll tell you what I do. I'll explain what we do. I'll show you how to get started. And if you're interested in making money and learning how to trade these markets, I'll help you do so. Let's take a look at those markets, see what the numbers were today. We got the pop, as we talked about, 0.6% on the NDX. If we look at the Dow, roughly 3/4, same thing on the Russell, 0.6 on the broad composite, 0.73 on the S&P. So 3/4 to about, 6/10, and pretty good gains. Overseas also got gains in Europe. The SSMI was flat, but you had decent gains in the DAX and in the CAX. Got a viewer question tonight having to do with the DAX and the dollar, so we'll look at those. Bonds, gold sell off a little bit. Oil up on the day, and we finally saw a rise in the markets. Let's look at the indexes here. Let's see what they tell us tonight. Now, if you joined me last night, and sometimes, bear with me here if I forget, but I believe I was talking about a little zone here as well last night. I know I told members this. This was the zone I was talking about, that little area right there. That's where the rubber is going to meet the road. That's where we're going to find out if we really have a range that is in this area here probably, or if we're simply setting up another ABCD structure to the downside. The way that one looks at this point is from here to there and back up to this area so far. If it were to push down, it would be something like that. And guess where it takes you? It takes you to the magical bullish retest regenerate that's been waiting in the wings for a long period of time. It's going to be a buy down there if we get to it. Whether it works out the way I've just drawn it or some other form, that we'll know once we see the results of the test. That's what the model's about. Market doesn't know where it wants to go. The market figures out where it wants to go as a result of test. Right? When you hear the word price discovery, what is that? That's the market testing. Okay, are you gonna reject my price? In other words, if I'm bidding, and there's somebody sitting there who was hitting the sell button every time, eventually one side or the other is going to run out of orders. Or either we're not going to have enough buyers, and price is going to fall, or we're going to overrun what sellers there were and price is going to rise. That's what a test is. That's price discovery. Can we trade higher or not? Can we trade lower or not? That releases information when it's testing something of significance. And that's what the model's about. S&P, so we got that one. So what do we got here? We don't know, right? We got what we should have got today. We got the bounce. I suspect you're going to go into that area tomorrow, and you're going to see prices flip right back around. If we go over and look at the other indexes. So let's see if they look the same. NASDAQ. Now, they're going to be the same in the sense that they're coming into something of significance. I just showed you what was significant on the S&P. What is significant here is this area up in there, and that's where that one's probably going to try to go. And as you can see, the NDX has a little bit farther, the NASDAQ has a little bit farther to run than the S&P on a percentage basis. I believe I didn't do the calculations. NDX has about the same probably. It's going to test that top of that bar. That's the breakdown bar. That's the area of significance here. On the Russell, it's not as clear. 2/3 of the way up is where I would think, probably about into that area. It's about 1377 or so. So that's the way the index is set up. You got exactly what you should have got. Everything here looks to me like things are in place. Now, if you will remember here on the Russell, when we came down, there was actually some other swing point highs over here. But essentially, as the Russell came down, it broke them all, except for one. Well, what is a break after you get over it and you come back and you just continue through it? Well, that was a bullish retest regenerate. That's where we should have seen buyers show up, but they didn't. So what does that do? Well, as soon as you get a bounce, you're going to get a sell-off, and look at the kind of sell-off you got. Now, as you come back up after breaking, here's the breaks. You can see the arrows. That tells you trend transition. The only way trend can transition is a swing point low gets broke. That's what these L's are. Those got broke. That says as you come back, you want to look at that bearish retest regenerate. And it just so happened that the congruent area was right there, and we blew right over it tonight. So what does that tell us? That tells us that question we just asked is there a range? And I think the answer is yes, there's a range. And that range, at least on the Russell, looks something like that right now. Now on the Russell, it's more interesting because the Russell is the weakest of the group at this point in time. And so if you pull over and look at the weekly charts, you can see that range really clear, right? It's really laid out clearly there. And let me stretch it down so it's perfect, or just about, somewhere in there. Take that, double it, right? That's what you do with ranges, and you say, okay, if we are to fall lower, let's get it up in there, where's it going to take us? Well, magically, it's going to take you right into the top of this bar. That is where I would think buyers show up, along with this swing point high, which would be the bullish retest regenerate on this time frame. If we're going to break to the downside, and I think we eventually will expand this range, that, my friends, is going to be the target. So that's the way the index is set up. I'm not going to run through the sectors. I still think that we got a little bit farther to go on a bounce, get a retrace, then we'll get that second test of wherever this high is, which is where I've already showed you I think it will be. And then we'll find out whether this thing's going to go to the top of the range or turn around and expand it, or attempt to expand it to the downside. Let's go over and answer a question from a viewer. Has to do with the world markets. So let's pop into that, and it has to do with the dollar. The question was with the dollar and the German DAX, how do those shape up? And how are they looking? And actually, it wasn't the DAX; it was the DX. So he was actually asking to look at the currency markets, both the UUP and the FXE. While we're here, let's look at this though. So we get a test and a test failure. 1215644. We got over it. Well, let me do that again. 12156. 12158. We got over it, back under it, less volume. That's a failure. This, unless it tested immediately again tomorrow, it gets over it. That to me looks like a failure, folks, and that looks like that one's going to come right back at you. So this one actually has the range thing going on, went right back to the top of it, and looks to have failed tonight. So that makes me want to look at another one. Let's see what the CAX looks like. And that one doesn't have the test failure. It didn't quite get to the top. I'm going to look at Switzerland while I'm here, and Switzerland looks to be dying on the vine as well. So I believe we're going to see Europe try to pull back, which is probably going to lead us back as well. Let's go over and look at those currencies for the viewer and see what they look like. And so if we look here, I'm going to go to the FXE first. And on the FXE, what do we do? All right, so this one's interesting. We'll have to look at a couple time frames. So you got over the swing point high. Here's your swing point high. You get over it, right, and tonight you come right back into it. So this is a bullish retest regenerate that's taking place on the FXE, on the currency, the European currency. And as a reminder, a bullish retest regenerate says, hey, this thing has broken out, right? Now we're coming straight back into it. When you come back into it, you're going to get into the bottom third if you're within 6 bars, which we are. You're almost there. I expect it's going to trade into this area and attempt to push back higher and continue this trend here. And so that's the way the FXE lays up or lays out. On the daily, let's look at the weekly. The weekly is a little different. Now, this is a very interesting setup because on the weekly, you're testing the swing point high. And so by the end of the week, if you're bearish this, you want to see it fail here and come back. Now, the other thing that's happening is you actually have a bearish retest regenerate over here that you almost got into and didn't quite get there. And it was way more than 6 bars, right? This was the breakdown. So the odds are when you come into here, you won't get more than a third of the way into it. So even if this does push higher, I expect the odds are is that it's going to get into it and get rejected at least the first time. And if it can't get over this swing point high and stay over it, it's going to have a test failure on the weekly as well, even before it gets up there. So this still looks to me as if it is weaker. Let's look at the dollar, which is the inverse of it. Inverse in the sense that a large portion of this dollar index is that, and this looks exactly the opposite of the FXE, and that is the swing point break here, the bearish retest regenerate. It's coming back into it. That's going to be the test, and you're probably going to see that test rather quickly. Let's see if this sets up the same way. And not quite, but almost. And what it is your bullish retest regenerate is down here. And that's your break right there. So yeah, actually it almost is exactly the same. So they're set up exactly the same. So the question is going to be, do you hold it on the weekly? In other words, does this break down on the weekly or does it hold? Does the FXE break out on the weekly or not? So in other words, do you get a test failure of a swing point low? Do you get a test failure of a swing point high on the FXE? And then on the weekly, on the daily, you have those other retest regenerates taking place. What do I think they're going to do? Well, I always defer to the trend, folks, until the trend tells me something different. Trend is long on this. It's not short. On the monthly, if you pull it over, trend is also long. It's in a big range, has been, can continue this range for a while. These things can build out for a long time. And so, this could come all the way back. I mean, that's possible. And still be bullish. As it builds out this range, of course, the thing, if you're bullish, is you want to see it break out. And right now, that's not what it's working on. It's trying to decide, is it coming back in? That's where it sits tonight. Folks, if you're interested in knowing how to trade, how to make money, call me, join the site, 303-912-9110, or write me, TAT@TA Today. Have a great night, and I'll see you next time. Good night, folks.